creates questions the human mind cannot answer. Out of reach, past all we can see, hear, and touch, beyond all we understand, lies the extraordinary.
Oh, there you go.
The extraordinary is this never-before-seen footage of the legendary Bigfoot. Not the famous film of 27 years ago. These images were filmed in 1993.
The big one I first filmed was, it looked like it was about 7.5, 8 feet tall and weighed 700 pounds. And then I lost it in the bush, and I was looking with my camera, and I seen this little one that's coming right at me.
There's two of them, I guess.
It is the greatest unsolved mystery of legendary actor Robert Stack's life.
I know a man in the CIA who saw some very strange things. He told me a story about being on a sub. He had the sonar out, the swooshing noise. These two objects kept screaming by it, faster than a torpedo, around the submarine, around the bow, came together as a unit, and flew off.
The UFO encounter he believes absolutely. The extraordinary is the Australian politician who says that during his 20 years in Parliament, he was guided by voices in his head.
If you asked me the logical question, why did you go into Parliament? I couldn't tell you. If you asked me, what can you identify that you achieved in Parliament? I couldn't tell you. If you asked me, why did I get out of Parliament? I couldn't tell you.
It is the strange tale of one man's love for a beast of the jungle.
Most of them love me very much. They, hopefully they don't even think about violence.
The extraordinary is the deadly mystery of this cruel, wind-blown mountain range that has claimed as many lives as the Bermuda Triangle, a craggy region of electromagnetic fields known as the Devil's Teeth. Just some of the stories that lie beyond our normal understanding. Tonight on The Extraordinary.
That remarkable story a little later. Good evening. I'm Warwick Moss. In this age of videotape, when just about everyone seems to have a home video camera, legends like the Loch Ness Monster take a lot more heat. If Nessie exists, we ask, where's the tape? If UFOs are treating us to close encounters, why hasn't someone come up with a clear video? We used to ask the same question about mysterious footage of the monster called Bigfoot in the American Northwest. If it was real, why hadn't someone caught Bigfoot on tape in the 27 years since he was first seen? Well, that old question may have just been answered. It is the most dramatic footage ever taken of any of the world's mythical or legendary monsters. It was taken on amateur home video in 1966, and to this day has stood out as the clearest evidence of the existence of Sasquatch, the giant Bigfoot of America's far northwest. While the stories of the abominable snowman and Loch Ness Monster perpetuate in the imagination, the image of the half-man, half-beast Bigfoot was captured on videotape in clear daylight. The film has become almost as legendary as the monster itself. Believers and skeptics have argued the film's authenticity for 3 decades. Now, the argument is about to heat up because of this. New amateur video shot in the same wooded region by Paul Freeman.
a man who's tracked Bigfoot for 10 years.
Probably 2 or 3 days old. They've been rained on.
It was taken after a recent spate of reported sightings by the local Nez Perce Indians. The Indians have believed in the creature's existence for centuries. Its legend is kept alive in stories passed down through generations. Freeman says he saw not only one Bigfoot that afternoon, but two, and they scared the daylights out of him.
Oh, God.
I was like a little 5-year-old. I was crying, and I asked the man upstairs, you know, I said, hey, if you let me get out of here alive, I'll never bother these critters again, and I'm not going to.
The creature appeared suddenly as Freeman was walking along a bush track toward a watering hole where he'd spotted footprints.
Yeah, it looks like they've been here. I just walked around to where the spring runs into the pond, and there were tracks in the mud, and still muddy. It hadn't even settled yet, so I said, gee, me Christmas, you know, one's already been here. It just must have run out of here.
Suddenly, there it was.
I hear the brush popping and stuff. Oh, there he goes.
Well, the big one, I first filmed was, looked like it was about 7.5, 8 feet tall and weighed 700 pounds. And then I lost it in the bush, and I was looking with my camera, and I seen this little one that's coming right at me.
Oh, God. There's 2 of them, I guess.
The startling video is being studied by scientists at Oregon and Northern California universities, but to some, it didn't come as a surprise. Indians on the Nez Perce reservation reported an incident a few weeks earlier that left the Northwest region on edge. A boy reported seeing a huge, hairy creature take a deer from the reservation's meat rack. 2 days later, tribal women sighted something on the distant horizon.
For some reason, I just happened to look up on a hill, and I said, Amo, come here and look at this. Come, what do you think that is? Is that what you saw a week ago, you know? Does that looks like a Bigfoot or something up there? He says, yes, that's what I saw. I had to stand about, 7, 8 feet tall. It was broad. There was no neckline. I was walking on 2 feet.
One witness was the curator of the Indian Museum, Susan Bouchel.
It wasn't a human. It was just too large to be a human. I know it wasn't a bear. I worked at Glacier National Park for 10 years. I've seen enough of grizzly bears and black bears, seen them both, you know, just on all fours and standing erect. I know what they look like, and it was absolutely not a bear.
Despite the new video, Freeman has his doubters among forest rangers who discount the film as a hoax.
They just don't want people up there, you know. If they tell the truth, they've probably got a building full of plaster casts and twisted off bushes and hair samples and everything else, you know.
If it is a hoax, it bears a striking resemblance to one that had to have been pulled in the same area decades earlier. The similarity of the two images is hard to ignore.
America has its eerie, ill-formed valley called the Badlands. Australia has the haunting aura of Ayers Rock. And Bermuda has its triangle of turbulent sea and freak tidal waves. Places where nature has moulded its clay and stirred its water with aberration and dark mystery. There is such a land of horror that has remained a regional secret for the past half-century on the other side of the globe. But the death toll is rising, and the hidden truth of the place they call Devil's Teeth is getting out.
The first thing that hits you is the wind, an unsettling and dismal wind that even in the heat of summer manages to send a chill up your spine. Some say it's the devil's wind that blows through the haunting Valais region in the heart of France, here in the shadow of Mount Mézenc. This otherworldly place filled with strange rock formations, where legend has it that Satan himself planted his fangs in the ground, here at the Devil's Teeth. It is a land of unexplained phenomena, balls of fire and bolts of lightning, electrical surges that stand your hair on end, and, most frightening of all, where mighty airplanes are pulled from the sky and hurled to the earth.
Je me suis intéressé à ces phénomènes d'avions qui tombaient sur nous.
I've been following the phenomena of plane crashes since 1943, at the time of the resistance. Since then, about 50 planes have crashed in and around Mazan. And I think about 40 crashes do not have valid explanations.
This place they call the Devil's Teeth has become better known in recent years as Europe's Bermuda Triangle, and it all begins with the strange and eerie wind.
C'est une région dont certains auteurs dans l'Antiquité.
Ancient authors call this region a locus terribilis, Latin for a terrible place. The geography is peculiar enough, but then there is the Burl, that cursed wind that blows there. It almost provides a soundtrack to the monstrous scenery.
Now the wind has a name, the Burl. Legend gives the Burl the supernatural powers that seem to dominate this hellish place. Powers that cannot be explained in terms of logic or human understanding.
When you're on the land to do repairs and all, as soon as you're hit by the Burl, you can feel its violence. You get the impression the wind actually vibrates. It's abnormal compared to elsewhere, that's for sure. And there are many storms during the summer which are very violent. I mean, they hit very, very hard. It's true. There are things you don't find anywhere else. Like the electric pole was cut in half completely. The lightning hit it and the pole split open from top to bottom. Specialists came. They studied the force of the wind to see what might have happened. Right now, we're still experimenting. We haven't found why it happened.
And the man from the electric company is not the only one looking to explain this energy no one can harness.
J'ai aperçu et j'en ai la certitude.
I saw it. I'm certain. I saw a huge ball of fire. It was big, like a wagon wheel. This fireball, it was on the other side of the bridge coming toward me. I was very afraid. I started to run like hell.
Talk to those who live here, like the villagers who will never forget the night in March, 9 years ago, when all rules of science were broken. It began with the ringing of a telephone, first one, then another, until it seemed every telephone in the region was ringing, but no one was calling. Outside, there was no storm or lightning. No lightning in the sky, that is. But some electrical surge was coursing through the area, a surge that seemed to come from the earth and be carried on the wind. Monsieur Belvoir, the mayor of the village, noticed when he went to check on his herd. A French television crew shot this unbelievable recreation of what happened next. The cow had been electrocuted, but just as the cow in the recreation was not harmed, so that one survived, stunned, but otherwise unscarred. Other cows in the region were electrocuted on that and other days. Though there were no visible wounds, many were killed. Farmer Maurice Lost has another story, one that's similar to many others.
I found myself enveloped in fire, but I didn't feel any heat. And there, about 3 meters in front of me, there was a black wall, like a rock, a wall that seemed impassable. I turned around. I didn't understand what was happening to me. And just then, at that moment, the fire disappeared. I was dizzy. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't find my bicycle. And then it was over.
At least he could walk away to tell a story some find impossible to believe. The same cannot be said for those who pass the region from the sky. All pilots have heard how control panel instruments suddenly spin wildly out of control, how the plane can then be sucked down toward the devil's teeth.
On dit que les avions qui sont appelés à passer par là seraient soumis.
They say airplanes rerouted through there sometimes encounter these peculiar conditions in particular. Radio navigation instruments experience disturbances.
There is still no earthly explanation for what happened on May 13, 1991. A tourist plane on a routine flight from Clermont-Ferrand to Marseille. The weather conditions were not good, but should not have been a problem to the experienced pilot. He knew the region well. So why did his plane and passengers smash into the mountain?
Pour nous, cette zone du Mézin provoque une certaine méfiance.
All of us mistrust the Mézin zone. We've had so many colleagues, pilots, hurled down against the mountain. And when it comes to our association, well, it's true we demand costly money guarantees when we're asked to fly over that region.
Scientists do their best to explain. They say the electrical and fire effects are felt in other volcanic zones, where activity disturbs something called tellurique.
Le tellurisme est un fluide qui se transporte sous la forme d'une nappe.
Tellurism is a fluid transported in the form of a sheet, an underground current around the globe. It utilizes the slightest geological resistance and is transported just like other electrical currents, except this one is natural.
Cette région, ce sont tous d'anciens volcans. Je pense que le sous-sol est quelque chose.
This region is full of extinct volcanoes.
On n'a pas de
I think
protection.
the subsoil may have something to do with the phenomena.
Actuellement, pour canaliser
We don't have any protection from the energy.
cette énergie.
Writers look toward the past.
Le chroniqueur Jacques Mon signale vers 1640-1650.
The historian Jacques Mo described the fall of a meteor in the 1640s. It wiped out a village next to Monastier-sous-Gaziel. And it destroyed the entire village of Bessières. Now there were rains of rocks, there were rains of blood, there were rains of toads, and then in the Middle Ages, there was lightning and fire.
And there are some old-timers here who believe there are tables of gold deep beneath the Valais region, and that this treasure has unchained the elements. Perhaps that is as good an explanation as any, but for now, when you look to the sky over this new Bermuda Triangle, the first thing that hits you is the wind.
We know his face from that other show about the unexplained. His deep, penetrating eyes seem to hide the secrets of all the world's unsolved mysteries. Yet when we met Robert Stack the other day, he told us about a few that still had him baffled. Like, how did he end up in a show like this?
Many eminent scientists declined to go on record with their official position on the mysterious face.
I wasn't going to do this as a series, but it's like Topsy. It just grew. So it's everything that I have planned for myself in life is really, in terms of this weird profession, have never worked. And by some strange osmosis, with a life of its own, these things just take off and go. That was 6 years ago, and today, Unsolved Mysteries is seen by millions around the world. Another show Stack resisted was the one that made him famous as Elliot Ness in the hit 1960s series, The Untouchables. It ran for 120 episodes. But Stack was hardly an unknown before playing Ness. He was a successful movie star and had gotten an Academy Award nomination for Written on the Wind. He was also a star athlete who grew up in a prominent theatre family where surrogate dads were the likes of Spencer Tracy and Clark Gable. Of the many interesting guests at his boyhood house, he remembers one in particular. We had a fellow called Ostoya, who was a yogi, who was a friend of my grandfather's, who, I don't want to get into this because every time I do, somebody wants me to do a show on the weirdness of things. He could levitate. They used to have, at the house, they used to hold hands, have a seance. I remember as a kid. And he would be bathed in perspiration. On the other side of the room, I remember there was my father's den. There was a silver tray with little silver cocktail shot glasses on it. And all of a sudden, they began going ding, 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 ding. And then the table, if I get into this, I'm going to get in trouble. Everyone's going to write me. I don't do those kind of shows, honest, I don't. But it was strange. He could stick needles through, control the involuntary muscles of the heart, buried alive. And a great friend of my grandfather's, who was about as he ran the old Los Angeles Theater, my grandfather, and his name was Ostoya, and there was a book written about him, pictures of him with Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and all the people of Hollywood. But again, this gets off into an eerie, weird area that I think that there is a certain measure of ESP and power control. But beyond that, I'm not into UFOs and all the rest. I believe the people who've seen these things. I know a man in the CIA who saw some very strange things, and he's a CEO of a very large corporation. He was executive officer of a nuclear submarine. Now, I believe him. He told me a story about being on a sub. He had the sonar out, the swooshing noise, these two objects came screaming by him, faster than a torpedo, around the submarine, around the bow, came together as a unit and flew off. Now, this is so weird. He said, you know what happened? We went back to Norfolk. I called Norfolk. I arrived. 2 men from the Pentagon were there, came aboard, checked with everybody, took the log books. As they left, they said, don't talk about this. No one's going to believe you anyway. Now, this is from a guy who was a CIA on a nuclear sub. And he tells it like he's saying, yeah, I had a couple of cups of coffee. So I allow the other people to make up their minds. I don't know. I believe him. Whatever happened, he saw. And the members of the crew saw. Or they had been somehow mesmerized by a giant Jupiter in the sky. My mother believed in reincarnation, and it's all pretty much to give people a feeling of comfort when you go to the great beyond. But I do know one thing. I do nothing that I do is premeditatedly done by me without somebody's help. It doesn't work like that. You feel like better one day than others. I think you get the feeling when you go through an earthquake like we just did, or something else. The temptation is, the human's ego is such that it pushes him into an arena whereby he becomes so special. And it just takes a couple of shakes like that to make you realize, hey, man, when you realize that 6 inches of mountain grew out of that shake, and the Grand Canyon has got thousands of feet, and you're here for 15 seconds or less, and then it's a good leveler. It's kind of makes you feel like, well, whatever it is, I'm glad to be here, but I'm not going to be critical.
Perhaps it was this hand of fate that led Stack, a confirmed bachelor, to a happy marriage of 38 years to wife Rosemary, something of a rarity in Hollywood.
Well, this was a fellow that my wife met that was a friend of the family's, actually. He was sort of a black sheep. And he set up his shop down on the pier in Santa Monica. His name was George Darius. And he was gifted, as these people are. Usually gifted better when they're not being paid. He happened to be a friend of the family's, of my grandmother's. And unbeknownst to me, my wife had met him. I didn't know that she even knew him. Well, we went together, and we broke up. Well, before she even met me, she went to him and he said, you're going to meet somebody who looks like Robert Stack. He said, no, it is Robert Stack. Now, they usually say you're going to meet a tall, dark stranger and you can take an ocean voyage. But he mentioned my name. And she figured, well, I can meet him because he was under contract to Columbia at the time. And he said, you're going to have a romance. Which, of course, we did. And then I was the world's most devout bachelor, and I was never going to get married. And we kind of had a thing of breakup and ruined both of our lives for about 3 or 4 months. And during this time, she went to see him. And he said, you will marry Robert Stack. And she said, marry Robert Stack without even speaking. Not only marry him, but you will marry him in January. Now that gets weird. And I was never going to get married. My mother and father divorced, my brother divorced. I couldn't think of one person who was happily married that I knew. And sure enough, everybody kept saying, why don't you marry her? You're out of your mind if you lose this girl. You're never going to find she's too good for you. But the bottom line was not that I'm going to get into witchery and all of the rest, but some people I do think have a kind of a prescience, and he's the only one that I know. Because he didn't mention you're going to meet a tall, dark stranger and go on an ocean voyage and you'll have good things happen to you like a fortune cookie, but he did mention at that time we were broken up, we were going to marry, mention the month, by George. And I didn't know anything about it until about 6 months afterwards when she told me about it. She said, you know, George told me we were going to be married. I said, really? Strange.
Modern man does not have as much contact with the wild as he once did. Most people have never seen a real wild animal in its natural habitat, let alone got close enough to touch one. But as Alison Holloway tells us from London, there are other people who will go to extreme lengths to make friends with members of the animal kingdom.
The most feared of the big cats, more powerful than even the alleged king of the jungle, the lion, the tiger is a killing machine, a ruthless manhunter. But don't be alarmed. The only thing that this tiger is hungry for is the love of her keeper, Nick Marks.
Most of them love me very much. Hopefully they don't even think about violence.
They become mere pussycats in his presence, docile, almost childlike. The normally ferocious beasts melt into affectionate friends, seemingly on the same wavelength as Nick. They greet him like a long-lost buddy.
I suppose it'd be silly to say it isn't dangerous, but I think it looks a lot more risky than in fact it is. Obviously, I know the animals very well, and hopefully knowing my job, one tends to sort of narrow the angles a bit.
The bond between Nick and his dangerous charges is beyond explanation. there's certainly no training involved.
I know the animals better by having contact with them. They get a lot out of it. I get an enormous amount out of it. And if I couldn't go in, build relationships with them, the job would be no fun. I wouldn't. I'd go and do something else.
The way Nick looks after his animals is unique. At other zoos, keepers aren't allowed to go in with the tigers.
I'm allowed to look after them in the way I see fit. I wouldn't probably be allowed to do that anywhere else. And I think that the way the tigers behave proves that it's the best way to look after them. Given a bit of common sense and maybe a nice large cage and happy tigers, it's not really a problem.
Everywhere Nick goes, the tigers follow. They're inquisitive creatures and like to watch what he does. They also like to play.
Tigers are very special, much maligned in a lot of ways. They're lovely, loyal animals. They jump on the top of the shed. That's to get, closer to have a nice head rub sort of thing. They like, have a nice rub and just show their affection.
There can't be many people who can say they've rubbed noses with a tiger and survived. But Nick knows the dangers. In 1980, 2 keepers here were killed by tigers. It's a risk he's prepared to take.
Some of them I can handle, some I can't. Some have been hand-raised, some haven't. Obviously the ones that I've had most contact with are the ones that are more handleable.
It's a mutual love affair. It may be love, but one full swipe of that paw and it could all be over.
I got a claw in my hand when I fed last Thursday. That was just a one-off. It's the first time in handing tigers lumps of meat that anything has ever done anything like that. It was only a little nick in my hand. It was really not worth mentioning, but not badly hurt. Now and again, but nothing too serious.
The key to it all, if there is a key, is the daily routine which the tigers are used to and which Nick sticks to religiously.
The morning is usually cleaning enclosures, and in the evening is feeding, and other time is spent with maybe meat collection, sorting enclosures out, cleaning sheds. It's a full day. There's lots to do.
The tigers know what to expect. They know that Nick is the provider.
We feed a fairly large amount twice a week, so they eat, and probably what I fed tonight will be gone by tomorrow morning. Most of it will be gone, and then I'll feed them again in 3 or 4 days' time.
At any moment, these tigers could end Nick's life, but because they love him, he lives.
The reward is the animals, what I get out. And maybe 9 days out of 10, nothing special happens, and you just do your job. And then one day something might happen, and it makes it special. Everything else has to take second place. You don't do the things that you possibly would do with more free time, but it's no problem. Tigers are very special.
Politicians are normally guided by their political persuasion. They follow party policy, philosophy, and public opinion. But the man we're about to meet says he was guided by something else during his 20 years in Australian federal politics. He represented the large electorate of Wilmot in Tasmania, a Liberal member who could best be described as a rebel. But what Max Burr was not known as was a man who listened to outside influences. He did, however, listen to things he called urges. Max Burr heard voices in his head. Perhaps you could say Max Burr is unpredictable, but the former MP says he's always had a guide, a force he's never quite been able to fathom.
It is an irresistible urge that comes into my mind. It's not, I wouldn't describe it as voices in the background or in the distance. It's just an irresistible urge that I must do something. And that something is then made clear. The something in the first instance was study for it to be an accountant. It was to resign from your job, to resign from another job, to stand for Parliament. And these irresistible urges keep on coming through that is what I must do. And I guess, and I keep on getting the urge, this is what you've got to do, this is what you've got to do, and it keeps coming back again and again and again until finally I make the decision to do it.
One of those urges eventually took him to Canberra in 1975 as the new Liberal member for the old Tasmanian seat of Wilmot. But it was an agonising decision made after a sleepless night more than a year before.
It was like a buzzing. This particular night was like a buzzing in my ears, with a dimension, oh dear, almost like being in a vortex, you know, where my whole head, and it seemed my whole body, was just in a constant spin, and I was actually being manipulated within that vortex. And all the time going through my brain was, you must stand for nominate for the Liberal Party for the next election. And this was just constantly surging through all of my thought patterns while my body seemed to be in this spinning vortex. And that went on for something like 5 hours. I simply didn't want to, because it meant giving up any security, all the security that I had, because to nominate for any political party meant that I had to resign my job, and I had no other form of income of any sort. I had no savings of any sort, and I had 2 kids and a mortgage and all the rest of those things. So, but whatever these urges were, just wouldn't let me sleep until I did, and I had one hell of a night. And eventually I made the decision about 6:30 that morning that, okay, I would nominate. And then I finally got to sleep.
The Maverick MP went on to represent Tasmanians for the next 18 years. But in 1990, there was another urge, another decision. He would not be contesting the next election. This was how he explained it back then.
The main reason, I guess, is a personal reason, in that I'm just tired. I'm worn out.
But when we spoke to him, his reason was much more remarkable.
I didn't have another urge like that until 1988. And the urge then was get out of Parliament. Get out of Parliament. Now, to be frank with you, if you ask me the logical question, why did you go into Parliament, I couldn't tell you. If you asked me, what can you identify that you achieved in Parliament, I couldn't tell you. If you asked me, why did I get out of Parliament, I couldn't tell you, because I don't know. All I know is that these inner urges come within me, that is what I've got to do, and I don't know why.
And those urges didn't just guide him professionally. It seems they controlled his private life too.
One of those urges was to divorce that first wife, my first wife, who'd been so understanding. We were married for 16 years, and in that time never had an argument, not one argument. And yet the urge came to me that I had to divorce her. And we did, and we divorced, and still didn't have an argument, and she's still one of my best friends. And I had the urge then to marry another woman. That other woman, my present wife Rosalind, had the same urges to marry me. And she has been subsequently instrumental in, if you like, introducing me in various ways to books that I have to read, to the present program that I'm undertaking, which is a volunteer overseas aid project. And Rosalind has been instrumental in opening up a whole new spectrum of things that are becoming known to me, so that these urges now are not only coming through my inner motivation, if you like, but also through Rosalind, and I'm responding as much to my urges as what I am to hers. I guess I have always accepted that these motivations, these urges, as I term them, are spiritually, or have a spiritual origin to them. I've never doubted that, and I've never disputed it. I've simply gone along with it, because I have the view that whatever form of intelligence it is that is designing all of these moves knows an awful lot more than I do. So I'm not going to buck against the system, if you like. I'm just simply going to go along with it. I don't know what's at the other end. I guess the bottom line is that it just boils down to faith.
Tonight, a look at another upcoming story. It may prove something scientists have long suspected. Animals know far more about this planet than we do. From California, the remarkable story of how animals knew in advance about the recent Los Angeles earthquake. For now, good night. See you in the future.
Animals simply have a heightened sensory perception of their environment. They're more in tune with nature, they live closer to nature, and they have senses that we simply don't possess.